Vladimir Putin appeared to mock the EU in an eye-opening documentary, claiming Russia is the only independent nation whereas countries depending on the bloc become weak and unpredictable. Putin has had an ominously tense relationship with the EU in recent years, steadily chipping away at the thawing of relations seen after the fall of the Berlin Wall and appearing to take an increasingly anti-Western approach. Moscow has aligned itself with the likes of Syria's Bashar al-Assad, Iran's Hassan Rouhani and China's Xi Jinping as the international state of play appears increasingly divided. It has left Brussels in a precarious position, not least since Britain's exit from the EU after the 2016 referendum and the election of Donald Trump as US President highlights and exaggerates that split even further. It has arguably emboldened Putin who, despite having to deal with sanctions after the Crimea crisis of 2014, continues to be a thorn in the side of the bloc. Appearing on World Order 2018, an Amazon Prime documentary by TV host Vladimir Solovyov, the Russian president discussed topics rarely answered by world leaders. During an interview with Mr. Solovyov about the destabilization of eastern Ukraine and the EU's measures in response to the annexation of Crimea, Putin derided attempts made by Brussels to weaken Russia. When asked whether the bloc will lift sanctions against Moscow over the Ukraine crisis, the Russian head dismissed the question, saying, "We did not introduce them. Ask who did this." Referring to Ukraine, he added, "What can they do? They are very dependent on the European Union, they can't act on their own." Mr. Solovyov interrupted him to ask, then who is the independent player? To this, Putin smiled as he claimed EU member states are dependent on Brussels, clearly suggesting he sees these states as being weak, and confidently confirming Russia's own independent status. He said, "Russia is. There are some other countries but I don't answer for them. Ask them how independent they are. You see, when they are overtaken with internal problems of some serious character they become dependent on these processes and such countries become unpredictable. It affects their reliability. So are they independent or dependent? And on whom they depend? Ukraine and Russia have been at odds since the Crimea crisis of 2014. However, since then, Putin seems to have found an unlikely ally in French President Emmanuel Macron. Macron has repeatedly referred to the death of NATO in recent addresses and argued against the idea of seeing Russia as a threat. In a joint news conference in Paris alongside NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg last year, he said, "Is our enemy today Russia? Or China? Is it the goal of NATO to designate them as enemies? I don't believe so."